Hello everyone, thank you for watching this video covering one of the Modern Horizons 3 Commander Precon decks. This section of video is taken from our podcast episode, which you can find a link to in the description down below for the full playlist, plus all the other videos that we do here on our channel. Thank you again for watching, and have a wonderful day. What happens when the things die?
What happens?
They fuel the Tarmogoyf.
They do. They go into Graveyard Overdrive. That's the next deck we're going to cover from Modern Horizons 3. It is helmed by Disa the Restless. First off, this is a Jund, like graveyardy kind of deck, just right out the gate. I know it's based off of some modern deck that I'm not familiar with, and that's why the 2 Blood Braids are in here. But we'll get to that. So it's 2 in Jund, so that's black, red, green. For a legendary creature, Human Scout, that is a 5/6. The ability says whenever a Lurgoyf, there's going to be a lot of weird words coming from this deck. John, do you know what a Lurgoyf is?
Lurgoyf is just kind of a created creature type that was just created for Magic for this kind of I think it's based around some kind of Norse myth, I want to say, like some kind of just like Norse mythology monster kind of thing, but Magic adapted it as just kind of, it's sort of like an even spookier beast, basically.
Gotcha. I've never like I said before, I didn't play Modern, and I know Tarmogoyf was huge in Modern, but I've never played Modern, so it's not card sets that I was used to dealing with. Anyway, back to Disa. Whenever a Lurgoyf permanent card is put into your graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, put it onto the battlefield. So if you get milled, if you get a card discarded from your hand or something, it just goes onto the battlefield, which is great. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a Tarmogoyf token. And those tokens, they have the Tarmogoyf ability where they have +1 toughness. Is that correct?
It is a token that is an identical copy to the Magic card Tarmogoyf, which Tarmogoyf is a 1 and a green. It starts as a I think it's a star and a star +1 for its power and its toughness. And it has power and toughness, or power equal to the number of card types among cards in graveyards, and its toughness is equal to that number +1. So if there are no graveyards, it at least is a 0/1, so that it doesn't just kill itself.
Exactly. Honestly, I think this commander is very strong. It says whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a Tarmogoyf token. So you could potentially be making a Tarmogoyf token every single turn, and that's just on top of you getting to deal damage. Like if you're dealing damage, you're getting the token, so it's a win more situation, and that's great to have on your commander.
Potentially more if your creature has double strike.
Yeah, that would be so sick, because then you would get that trigger 2 times. Let's see here. Some of my favorite cards from this deck, one of them is called Exterminator Magmark. It is a 2 black-red for an artifact creature, Phyrexian Construct. That's a 5/3. It says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets only a single non-land permanent an opponent controls, if another opponent controls one or more non-land permanents that spell could target, choose one of those permanents, copy the spell. The copy targets the chosen permanent. So basically, if you have a removal spell that's just a single target, like a Swords to Plowshares, but you're only able to use it on one person normally, you could just target someone else, one of your other opponent's creatures, with that same Sword to Plowshares for the same 1 mana, which is crazy. And you get the effects of both, which is pretty insane. And then lastly, on this card, it has 1 in a black, Regenerate Exterminator Magmark. This card is really sick. It turns all your removal into a 2-for-1, which is really awesome. Yeah, just a great card. As far as
certainly what's really cool about it as well, for the sake of this deck specifically, because your commander is popping out Tarmogoyfs and you have other cards in this deck that also do the sort of Tarmogoyfy, Lurgoyfy sort of effect, this card is an artifact creature as well. Cards that have multiple card types on them, when they are in your graveyard, they count as multiple card types at a time. So if this Magmark does end up in your graveyard, it is now fueling your Tarmogoyf by 2 card types for the cost of 1 card.
Correct, which is the whole idea here. I should have covered this second, but here we go. Koram, the Undertaker, is the secondary commander of this deck.
The Undertaker.
It's 1 and Jund for a legendary creature, Human Warrior. It's a 0/5. Koram, the Undertaker, gets +X/+0, where X is the greatest power among creature cards in all graveyards. So this takes into account your opponents, and if they're playing the new Eldrazi deck, well, that's just good for you.
Well, that's just D&D.
Then it says, whenever Koram attacks, each player mills a card, and then during each of your turns, you may play a land and cast a spell from among cards in graveyards that were put there from libraries this turn. So the idea is you get to do that in your main phase too. And it kind of solves the issue that a lot of decks like this have, where like, oh no, all my lands are going into the graveyard. How do I play my spells?
That's really cool. I'm double checking that ability here. During each of your turns, you may play a land, cast spells from among cards in graveyards. You can cast from your opponent's graveyard.
Whoa.
You can get their lands and you can cast their spells.
It's pretty amazing.
Because he does not give you mana fixing towards the stuff if you'd want to cast them in your opponent's graveyard. You would need the mana and you do have to cast them. But he lets you play lands from your opponent's graveyards. With him down as you're attacking with, you should never miss a land drop again, because you attack with him, go to your second main, and then you play whatever got milled. It reads kind of like a Tali kind of to me, where like he's giving you advantages off of your opponent's libraries whenever he goes to combat.
Yeah. It's kind of exactly a Tali, except for exiling the card, it just goes into the graveyard. So super upside for you if you're doing the Tarmogoyf strategy. I still think that Disa is a much more powerful commander than Koram, but I don't think you should cut Koram from this deck. I think it works very well in the rest of the shell.
He's the Undertaker.
Yeah, it's just cool. It's a super sick looking card.
I don't know if I'm doing that right. I don't know wrestling. Sorry.
I also don't know wrestling, so
Joseph can school us next week.
Yeah, Joseph. Please,
moving on.
Please help. Let's see. One of my other favorite cards from the deck. Oh, Tempt with Mayhem. It's an instant for 1.
This card is so sick.
It's so cool. 1 and 2 red for an instant. Tempting Offer is what it says. And then it says choose target instant or sorcery spell. Each opponent may copy that spell and may choose new targets for the copy they control. You copy that spell once, plus an additional time for each opponent who copied the spell this way. You may choose new targets for the copies you control. So
have you ever wanted a spell to teach somebody how the stack works?
This will break some people's brains. It almost broke mine reading it, because it keeps going and it keeps going. But the shenanigans you can get up to with this is just absolutely wild.
Yeah, it's super good, right? Because like the way it's templated is, if no one takes your offer, at minimum you do 3 mana, you get a copy of whatever it's cast, whether that's your opponent's or yours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great. Like 3 mana for copying your spell is a totally great rate. So, especially if the spell is worth more than 3 mana, you just get to do it again for way less mana, and then hopefully someone else decides to take your tempting offer and go with you.
Could you imagine hitting a Jessica's Will on this?
That's exactly like the scenario.
Would you like to resolve 4 Jessica's Wills? Here you go.
I don't think anyone could turn down like the Jessica's
free cards.
Yeah, it's like, that's awesome. Mana and cards, like that's amazing. I want to get that card and play with it. I think it would be really fun. I think lastly here, before we move on to upgrades and cuts, something important. We have a Kindred enchantment, which I've never seen before. It's 2 and a green for a Lurgoyf aura called Tarmogoyf Nest. Or no, I'm actually looking at the wrong card.
No, you're looking at the right one. Yep, it's called Tarmogoyf Nest.
No, I meant to be looking at Altar of the Goyf. So was this a reprint or is this?
That's not a new card. Yeah, that was from Modern Horizons 2. And then if you wanted to circle back to the Tarmogoyf Nest as well, it also it hits a land and it gives the land an activated ability to create a Tarmogoyf token.
Which is not bad at all. That's really, really strong.
The reason these cards look strange is because Kindred is the replacement keyword for tribal. And this is the first time it's been printed on paper.
Thanks. I totally did not realize that.
Yeah.
I was like, what am I looking at?
the keyword has been changed on digital formats. This is going to be the first booster product that has paper copy versions of cards printed with Kindred.
That's cool. I like Kindred as a replacement for tribal because typal is really stupid. Typal sounds dumb when you say it out loud.
It was called tribal before.
Yeah, there was like a whole people were trying to call it typal, but it's just like it just doesn't work because it's not a real word. But Kindred is a great word to represent common bond. So yeah, if we can replace tribal with that, I like it.
Yeah, I'm on the fence about it personally, but I'm sure we'll get used to it over time.
Yeah, I definitely like it more than typal. I think Kindred makes sense. Typal is you have to explain that to someone who's never played the game before. And
fair enough.
Kindred is a word that already exists, so why not use it? Man, honestly, there's a lot of great reprints in all of these decks. These decks are kind of reprint piles again. Sir Conrad is in here. Insane card, is definitely the strongest card in every deck that it's in my opinion. Selvala, Heart of the Wilds, is another amazing, expensive reprint.
Dude, yeah, Selvala's so good.
Yeah. Let's see. Archon of Cruelty, crazy card. Really, really strong. Honestly, yeah, the whole thing is just chock full of good reprints.
There's 3 Planeswalkers in this deck.
Yeah, one I've never heard of, but it's definitely not a new one. Grist, the Hunger Tide. I didn't even know when this thing came out.
Grist was one of the Planeswalkers from Modern Horizons 2.
Gotcha. Yeah, Grist is really good here. I'm not going to read it out loud because it's not super important to the deck. But
Ignoble Hierarch is also in there as well, a super mana dork.
Yeah. You also get 3 talismans in here and a Maskwood Nexus, which is really amazing.
Oh, dude. Maskwood Nexus? That's great.
This deck has got some crazy reprints. Also, I do want to mention the lands. There are some really, really good lands that are being reprinted in these decks. Not so much in this one. When we get to the Eldrazi deck, I'll talk more about that. But I don't love how many tap lands are in this deck, just because that will make you slow down. It just will slow you down. So if you can eliminate tap lands when possible, do it. And there's just quite a few here.
So apart from lands, what are you adding?
I think Bramble Familiar would be a great addition to this deck. For those of you who don't know what that card is, it's 1 and a green for an Elemental Raccoon 2/2. That is also a mana dork. It taps for 1 green. Or you can pay 1 and a green, tap it, discard a card, and then return this card to your hand. Why you would want to do that is because it also has Fetch Quest as its sorcery adventure side. So pay 5 and a green, mill 7 cards. So that's helpful for your Tarmogoyf strategy. And then you put a creature, enchantment, or land card from among the milled cards onto the battlefield. This card is dope. I love this card.
That's really good. That's really good with the commander as well, because then the Fetch Quest does its own recursive thing, and then Deso will see any Lurgoyfs that get milled.
Exactly. So this is a perfect upgrade for this deck. It also is just a great mana dork, so it can help you get to the cards you want to cast, and then it has a way to put itself back in your hand so you can cast the big part. It's one of the weird ones where you typically cast the creature half before you cast the adventure side of the card, but it's really strong. My next upgrade would be Conduit of Worlds, because this card is sick. And any deck where you're throwing a bunch of stuff in your graveyard, we talked about Koram, the secondary commander of this deck, being able to play some of the lands out of your graveyard. But Conduit of Worlds is a way to make sure that happens consistently. So what it says, it's 2 and a green for an artifact. It just says you may play lands from your graveyard. And then it says tap, choose target non-land permanent card in your graveyard. If you haven't cast a spell this turn, you may cast that card. If you do, you can't cast additional spells this turn. Activate only as a sorcery. So I love this. I use this effect a lot in my mono green landfall deck on Arena. Just because it's great. There, anytime that you're hellbent, have no cards in hand, you can just do this and get something great out of your graveyard. Plus, people often don't realize how strong this is, and then they're like, "How are you just replaying all the things I'm getting rid of?" And it's Conduit of Worlds, and it's great.
Yeah, I 100% agree. A card like that is super cool. I don't know if I 100% agree with you with that being in this deck, because you are looking to fuel your Tarmogoyfs with as many card types as possible. So you don't want to be removing your lands from your graveyard all the time. I could still see an argument for having it in here, because like maybe if you have too many lands in your graveyard, then sure, absolutely go for it. But I don't know if I would put more than just the one of this in a deck like this. You know what I mean?
Fair enough. I think just with like you have a Terramorphic Expanse in here, and that's enough to make Conduit of Worlds amazing. Like just a single like sack to fetch for a different land. Basically, Terramorphic Expanse goes into your graveyard, and then you can just always recast it. So you're never missing land drops for the rest of the game. And you will have lands in your bin regardless of that. So I think it's all right. And it just makes sure that you just aren't missing anything. And if something does wind up in your graveyard that you do not want to be there, you can get it back. So
okay. No, you know what? That's fair. That's very fair and valid points. I like that. But also my point, like I said, still stands is if you're trying to do the sort of set up your delirium, set up card types kind of thing, don't fill this deck with any more than like say maybe one of this kind of effect.
Yeah, like definitely don't run like a Crucible of Worlds or a Raminap Excavator. I don't think those are worth it here.
Yeah.
There is no actual Tarmogoyf in this deck. So
right. You got multiple different ways to create the actual token of Tarmogoyf, but Tarmogoyf himself is not actually in this deck, which is really silly.
Yeah, especially because your commander itself synergizes with Goyfs. Like everything in this deck is meant to synergize with Goyfs. So the fact they didn't put Tarmogoyf in here makes no sense, but you can fix that by doing it yourself. So
you can, and if you don't like the fall, you read the one you did is the Fallout one, right?
Correct. Yeah.
You can purchase a Old Border Time Spiral Remastered Tarmogoyf for $9.
True. Expensive upgrade, but I would say if you're playing the Tarmogoyf deck.
Brother, you don't know the cost history of Tarmogoyf, apparently. Tarmogoyf.
Oh, no, I know it used to be.
Yeah.
It used to be insane. Back when Tarmogoyf was like a very popular deck in Modern, it was very expensive.
Yeah, I think Tarmogoyf at its peak was like 200 at one point, I believe. I recently watched a really, really good Ristic Studies video covering the history of Tarmogoyf. That's a very good watch if you're interested in learning the history behind a deck like this here. But at one point in its premier play pattern, Tarmogoyfs were pushing upwards of $200 a copy, give or take.
That's wild. And you had to run four.
Foils were triple that.
That's crazy. That's so nuts. My last upgrade will be Slimefoot and Squee, because this card rules. It's so good. You want your graveyard to be big, so Slimefoot has so many targets. It's another way to just like, why not? Like your graveyard's gonna be big. Why not use that to your advantage more than just bumping your creature's power and toughness that are on the board? Slimefoot and Squee is black, red, green for a legendary creature, Fungus Goblin, 3/3. And it says, whenever Slimefoot and Squee enters the battlefield or attacks, create a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. That's only important for the other part of Slimefoot's ability. So you pay 1 and then Jund, so black, red, green. Sacrifice a Saproling, return Slimefoot and Squee, and up to one other target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is just another way to add recursion to your deck, which adds a lot of resiliency. Because what happens if your Goyfs go to the bin? Then you're not benefiting from any of your other stuff being in the bin. So this is how you get your Goyfs back, because they will get removed. So Slimefoot is pretty perfect as an upgrade here. But how do we make room for your upgrades? You can't just play 104 cards. It's not legal. So we got to cut some stuff. John, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see the purpose for Bloodbraid Challenger or Bloodbraid Elf being in this deck. I know that in the OG modern version of this deck, the Cascade element on Bloodbraid Elf, Bloodbraid Challenger didn't exist, but Bloodbraid Elf, I know there was a reason that it was being run in that deck. Can you talk me through that?
The backbones of very traditional Jund modern decks were like several of these Cascade creatures, Bloodbraid Elf itself actually being banned in modern for quite a while before she was finally released from her cage due to the threat of Oko, of all things, if you believe it. Yeah. Yeah, these Cascade cards were kind of the big finishers alongside Tarmogoyf at the time, because they would cascade into like spells that would then fuel into your graveyard to then fuel the Tarmogoyf. But yeah, I could see like why you maybe wouldn't want those in a deck like this. I mean, it's a 4-drop and a 5-drop, so I mean you would cascade them down into relatively useful cards all the way down pretty much, right? Like cascade using Bloodbraid Elf, cascade into, say, Soccer Tribe Elder that then ramps you and puts a creature into your graveyard. So like it's cool sometimes, I guess, but
the problem is with the actual like build of this deck, there's not enough targets for Bloodbraid Elf because it's a 4. So Bloodbraid Elf is a 4 CMC card. Bloodbraid Challenger is 5, but for Bloodbraid Elf specifically, like there are not very many targets for it. Like most of your creatures are above 4, like 4 or more, and that does not work with Cascade.
Yeah.
So the best thing you can do is like hit a Yavimaya Elder or a Soccer Tribe Elder, and it's not worth running Bloodbraid Elf for that. It's just not.
Yeah. The Challenger is also really interesting as well because of that backpedals then on that theory that I had about as far as like the Conduit of Worlds kind of thing. It's like, yes, it has Escape. That's super cool that you can get a 2-card value out of your graveyard, but Escape, it does have a cost of removing cards from your graveyard, which again, if you are leaning into the Tarmogoyf, I would like as many card types in my... Now, granted, this can be caveated a little bit by the fact that, like, especially the Tarmogoyf tokens do see your opponent's graveyard, but you can't rely on their graveyard being as filled as yours. Tarmogoyf's biggest strength is definitely being fueled off of your own graveyard. So a card like Challenger that to get its best value back later is to remove pieces out of your graveyard. Unless you have stockpiled your graveyard, that is not what your deck is looking to do.
Yeah, especially just to get back a 4/3 with haste and cascade, like
into Soccer Tribe Elder.
Yeah, exactly. Like you don't have enough good targets for it. If your deck was constructed around cascade or built to like really enable Bloodbraid Elf, that would be way different. But here in this version of this deck, they don't make sense. So cut them.
Sure, I agree. For
other cuts, we have Find and Finality. I like these kind of like dual cards, but not this one. So the find half is you can pay black green hybrid mana for a sorcery that says return up to 2 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. I just think there's better things. Like this is like just a power crept card. Like this card was probably fine when it was printed, but it's not fine anymore. So 2 mana to get 2 creature cards specifically out of your graveyard just back into your hand. That's not that great when you could just play Slimefoot and Squee and just get the creature onto your battlefield instead.
Have you ever wanted to pay the cost of Raise Dead twice?
Exactly. Just
now
play
you can.
Raise Dead. Reanimate any of the auras that are 2 mana that get a creature out. Like Dread Return, you can flash that back. That would be a way better thing to do here. The other half of this doesn't make this card playable. It's Finality, 4 black-green for a sorcery that says you may put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature you control. Then all creatures get -4/-4 until end of turn. Obviously, you're hoping to destroy all the creatures on the board except for your Tarmogoyfs, and that's it. That's the whole plan here. But why not play a board wipe that just guarantees everything dies. That like -4/-4 is not enough to kill a lot of very powerful threats. God forbid you're playing against the Eldrazi deck. That won't do a single thing to that deck. You will just kill all your own stuff instead. So, yeah, not that great. This card has just been power crept over time, so I just recommend cutting it. And then for a final cut, we have Bituminous Blast. There was like some weird Cascade sub theme happening in this deck, but again, this is a 5.
Again, we already talked about how traditional Jund was built. Bit Blast was definitely a part of that.
Yeah, so 3 black-red for an instant that has Cascade, and then it says Bituminous Blast deals 4 damage to target creature. So you just paid 5 mana to deal 4 damage. That's horrible. And then you're hoping to Cascade into something else, but that might not be something worth even doing. It might be a Soul Ring. You know how bad that would feel if you paid 5 mana to Cascade into a Soul Ring and then hit something for 4? That would feel terrible.
Oof.
That'd be bad. So don't play almost anything else, or one of the 4 upgrades that I told you about. But with that, that's pretty much all I've got to talk about with Graveyard Overdrive.
Yeah. I mean, it seems fine, I suppose, you know. There's definitely an air of like, this is certainly the deck that you can view it from the outside and say, hey, look at these interesting constructed cards that they threw into a commander deck for some reason, right? Like, yeah. Are you a traditional Jund enjoyer? I'm sure you'll get a kick out of this deck. Honestly, seeing some of your favorite Jund friends here, like Bloodbraid Elf and Tarmogoyf and, you know, things like that. So
it is interesting. I have no draw to play this deck or buy this deck because I just think it's a little bit of a boring strategy. But hey, if it's up your alley, if it's your cup of tea, go for it. It will probably be fun. And I do appreciate that it doesn't seem like a very degenerate, weird, just super obscene, powerful thing. It just seems fair. It seems like good magic. I'm noticing for creatures in here, I know that they were they wanted to lean more into having all of your having your biggest things that grow in their power and toughness based on your graveyard be the Lorgoyfs, but they don't even have some of the better not Lorgoyf cards in here. If you want to really do a fun upgrade path in this kind of thing, go and grab all those varieties of creatures that get their power and toughness boosted equal to some determining factor of your graveyard or opponent's graveyard. Nighthawk Scavenger comes to mind specifically from Zendikar Rising. It's a 1 and double black. It has the same Lurgoyf effect on it, that it has power equal to all card types among graveyards, and then it naturally has flying, lifelink, and death touch. That's automatically better than every single one of the Goyfs in this deck.
That's a super good card. Better Batman is great.
That's sick. That's so... Yeah, play that.
But but no, as a whole, it seems perfectly reasonable and fine. If you love Tarmogoyfs or Lurgoyfs in general as a tribal, I'm sure there's something here for you. But I think this one needs work to get good.
It seems like a pile. I'll say it like that. Seems like a pile.
Mm-hmm.